Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is Modern Halacha. It's Parshat Nasor, so we're going to talk about business, laws of business, especially regarding modesty in the business setting. Because you know that this week's Parsha, we learn about the Sotah lady. The Sotah is a woman that is accused of adultery. Her husband has warned her in front of two kosher witnesses that don't be in a private setting with a certain person, and she doesn't heed his warning. So the husband's like, I don't want you hanging around Mr. XYZ in a private setting where problems can occur, and she doesn't heed his warning. She goes and so what does the Torah say? Now he is accusing her of committing adultery, being disloyal. So the Torah says it's kind of like an ancient DNA test. They take her to the Kohen Gadol, to the Kohen in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, like you see back here, such a temple. And she is required to drink a certain potion. If she has been pure and she's been falsely accused, then God gives her blessings. If she wasn't able to have children, then she'll be able to have children, and so on and so forth. But if she's committed the most horrible treachery and she's been treasonous against her husband, what happens to the Sotah woman?
She dies.
She dies a very horrific and tragic death. Her stomach starts to engorge and get bigger and bigger and bigger till she basically passes a very tragic death. So this week we're going to devote this shiur to the laws of Yichud and modesty in the workplace. Why? Because what got this Sotah woman into this terrible predicament? And I want to make something very clear. Even if she is found to be non-guilty by this ancient quotient, she has to endure a lot of embarrassment because everybody gangs around her. It's like they didn't have the NFL or NBA, it's the finals soon. So in the olden days, they didn't have the finals. People got, watching this whole episode, it was like an exciting type of movie, entertainment, so to speak. People around Jerusalem would come to the gates of the temple to see it. Did she cheat? Didn't she cheat? And it's terribly, terribly embarrassing for her. Now, what got her into we learned from the laws of Sotah, a very important law, and I just want to make something clear. In today's society, especially we're living in Los Angeles, we're living in the 21st century where there's no such thing as modesty. And we're not living in a society where it's a capital crime to commit adultery. These laws we have to study and be very, very familiar with. Because the beginning of the end is what? Not keeping the laws of Yichud. What is the laws of Yichud? So let's talk about that. According to Torah law, it is forbidden to be in a private room together with a married woman.
What if it's a normal woman?
No, I'm going to talk about that. So a married woman is not allowed to be in a private room with somebody other than her child, her brother, or her husband or father. Now, that we know, obviously a mother is allowed to be alone with her son, a father is allowed to be alone with his daughter, grandparents with grandchildren is not a problem. Because the Torah, God is the architect of our being. In Kabbalah it says, one of the strongest urges a person has is a sexual urge, right? And that's really what the whole meaning of Sotah is. We're worried that this woman that didn't listen to her husband, she's a renegade. Why is she going back and being in this private proximity of that man? We're worried that what happened? She has cheated. So the Torah knows, especially us men, what a danger. So in order not to lead down that slippery slope of adultery, the Torah says that it is forbidden from the law of Torah. Same way it's forbidden to work on Shabbat. It's forbidden to eat non-kosher. It's forbidden to be with a married Jewish woman in a private room that is especially locked, where nobody can come in. So King David had a horrible, horrible experience. I mean, we look at the lives of our great prophets, and literally a lot of the parts of their life was a living nightmare. Do you know what happened to King David? King David had many wives, and one of his sons from a different wife raped one of his daughters from a different wife. And that's the episode of what? Amnon and Tamar. So King David's son Amnon, this is in the scripture, it's Beferush in Navi. He had a son named Amnon, and he had a daughter from a different wife named Tamar. Amnon raped Tamar. And Avshalom, in order to avenge this terrible, he killed Amnon. So when King David saw that not only, see, men and women together is like fuel and fire. Things explode, you know? So we don't have to be too foolish to realize that it's if something bad, something illegal could happen, it's a high probability it will happen. So when King David saw that even a brother was willing to rape his sister, King David made another rule. He made a second level. He added onto the Torah. And you know what he said? He said even a Jewish boy and a Jewish woman that's not married, they cannot be together in a private setting. So he added, because after he saw that his own son raped his own daughter, see, basically how adultery doesn't work in a vacuum, right? The Chachamim and the Torah are there to help us to be pure and have a one-way ticket to heaven, not hell. So in order to keep us away from this fire of sin, what did King David do? He said, even with a single woman and a single man, they cannot do Yichud. Then, in the time of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, they saw that the Jews were hanging around shiksas a lot. So, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel added a third level, which is important to realize, by the way, which things are forbidden from a Torah level, which things are forbidden on a rabbinic level, just because sometimes it's easier to find heter. So, during the times of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, we're not allowed to even be alone in a private setting with a non-Jewish woman or man, right? It goes both ways, obviously. So, now let's talk about common examples where Yichud can occur. A teenage girl babysitting a boy 9 years or older, one-on-one. That could potentially be a big problem of Yichud. Now, unfortunately, this shur is going to be a little bit on the shorter side. We may need to do a part 2 and 3 because there's many laws. There's circumstances where we allow Yichud because of certain factors. There's certain circumstances where Yichud, if the people that are around are promiscuous, they're paruts, they don't have no shame, the laws of Yichud become, more difficult. But I'm going to give you 6-7 different examples where potentially problems of Yichud can occur. So a teenage girl babysitting a boy 9 years or older. A man driving, let's say a man and a teenage girl babysits your children. Now you have to drive her 20 minutes away to her house at 2 o'clock in the morning. There could potentially be a problem of Yichud, especially if there's nobody on the roads at that time. Okay, another case. So I'm not saying all these cases are forbidden in all circumstances, but this is just a heads up where problems of Yichud can occur. A girl studying at her friend's house at night while only the friend's father or grown brother are home with two girls. Now, this is something also that a lot of people are not. Oh, this is probably the most classical case that we're going to delve into. A woman working very late at the business with a male worker, right? We don't want them to do extracurricular activities, right? A repairman, you know all the jokes with the gardeners. A repairman or gardener being alone with a woman in the house, and the husband is not even in the city. Because in this tonight, unfortunately, I'm not going to delve into that because it's not the scope of this year. But a married woman, when her husband is in town, it allows for more permitted circumstances to take place. Now, we know that there's something called Airbnb. Let's say you want to board somebody in your house. A male guest or boarder in a house when the hostess is away and only the daughter, which is like 7 or 8 or teenager, is alone, right? That's another classical case. And this is the case that I wanted to go into a little bit more in depth. And that is one of the best times, most happiest times for a young boy and girl is when they get engaged. Now, some people, engagement in today's world is not kiddushin. Halachically, there's really no relationship. It's just a promise to get married. So, once a boy and girl are about to they propose to each other, they're engaged in the secular terms, not in the Torah terms. Because you know, kiddushin, engagement in the Torah terms, is you give the ring, she's like a married woman. Almost. But what we're talking about in secular, modern terms, if you're engaged to a woman, you have to be, people think that, oh, I'm going to marry her anyways, and the Satan gives you more reason to be in private situation where nobody else is around. It's not permitted. So when a couple is engaged, even more so they should review with each other the laws of Yichud, because they are not allowed to be alone very late at night on some deserted road, taking a walk, even in the car, or they have to keep the laws of Yichud and not be in a private setting with each other. Because God forbid, we want children to be born in a kosher way, not out of wedlock. So they're not even allowed to hold hands. And I just want to make something else very, very clear. And that is that any girl, 99% of girls above 11 or 12 or 13 years old, they are nida. You know what nida is? They have their menstrual flow. So it's one of the commandments of the Torah. It says, do not even come close to a woman that's nida. El isha betumad nidata lo takriv. It's from the Torah law. So again, this unfortunately a lot of people think, oh, since we're engaged, we could hold hands and kiss and do other stuff. But according to the Torah and Halacha, all of that can only take place after the chuppah. So included in that is the laws of Yichud, right? They have to be very vigilant and careful that they should not be together in a very private place that could lead to to sin. Now, let's talk about two very important ideas tonight, and then we'll go into the laws of modesty in the workplace. The first thing to know is, where is the place that Yichud is forbidden? So, there's a beautiful sefer by Rabbi Teherani we could be proud as Persian Jews. He wrote a very beautiful sefer called Divrei Chachamim. And he writes very beautifully the laws of Yichud according to Sfardim. Rabbi David Teherani, he says, Bayit shepetcho na'ol. The obvious place where it's forbidden to be in Yichud is where? A house or apartment that's what? Locked. Or shepitcho sagur ach en reshut l'shut. Or even if it's not locked, the door, but nobody would barge in. You're not expecting anybody to barge in. Let's say you don't have any roommates, your brothers, and nobody else lives in that apartment, right? You're out studying in medical school in Kalamazoo, right? And you don't have any roommates. So even if you technically didn't lock the door, 99.999%, unless the guy wants to kill you or rob you or he's Al-Qaeda or a terrorist, to come in and catch you, would anybody just come into your... So again, you cannot bring over one of your female medical students, close the door even though it's not locked. It would be a classical problem of what? Yichud. Because you can't say, oh Rabbi, the door's not locked. Technically somebody could walk in, but it's your apartment, you don't have any roommates. You're not even in your own... See, if you're in your house and your mother and father or your brother or sister or thing could walk in any second, again, that could make the case, the laws maybe will be more lenient. But in this case, where it's only you, it's only your place, even if the door's not locked, you're not expecting anybody to come in. Again, you would not be allowed to be just, do one-on-one studying with another female medical student. Or another case is שהמפתח מחוץ בחור המנהל באופן שיהיה אפשר להיכנס לשם מפתח ולפתוח יש בזה איסור. But let's say that it's not even visible where the key holder is. So any time that the room is exclusively your place and nobody's expected to come in, even though it's not locked, is a problem of Yichud. Now, especially the post can bring down places where, even in a house where there is brothers and sisters and people living. But let's say a basement, you have this dark, dark basement where you visit, or wine cellar, you only visit a few times a year, right? It's so, the lighting there is not appropriate. So the post can bring down an attic, right? People usually are not going into their attic, especially you have to go up a certain... So an attic and basement that are usually not visited by household members on a regular time. It's not accustomed to go in there. Even if the door of the attic is open or the basement. But people rarely, right, people of the household don't show up there. Again, these are places where Yichud is not allowed. Now let's talk about office, because this is where I want to take the shiur more to. One of the most heartbreaking things that ever happened to me, which, the older you become, you realize that the Torah is very, very practical. The Torah says mamzer, bastards. Things like this happen, where even religious people that are Shomer Shabbat, they don't follow the laws of Yichud. And real sotas happen. Unfortunately, we don't have the water to make sure, but in today's workplace, misrat shadelet ne'ula. Let's say the boss, right? I studied to be a CPA. So it's CPA time, it's tax time, and you have to get there's always deadlines in business, right? Deadlines. And the boss asks his personal secretary or assistant, which is a female, to stay till 12 o'clock because tomorrow a project is due. An office is also a place where Yichud is forbidden, especially if the door is locked. משרד שהדלת נעולה והמפתח נמסר רק בידי איש ביטחון של משרד או שומר ויש שם מערכת טלוויזיה במעגל סגור שרואים כל מי שמתקרב לדלת ולפתוח אותה, אסור להתחיים שם. And even you might tell me, oh, Well, my CPA or law firm is in a 10-story building that there's constant security. And technically, the security guard has a master key to come in any of the rooms. But does that any of the times happen? No. So, even in an office setting with your secretary, it is absolutely forbidden. Because that is the beginning. Guys, and I want to clarify something. The Maharal says a very important idea. He says, it says, God, save me from what? The hands of sin. See, the trick of a God-fearing person is what? The trick of a God-fearing person is that we have to take safeguards that don't bring us to that very dangerous predicament that we know that what's going to happen to us? We're going to fail. So, the next exhibit of tonight's shiur is what? How long? Let's say you're in an elevator. Let's say you're in an elevator. Is that forbidden? You're in an elevator alone with a woman. Do you have to, and you're going to level 25. And it's an express elevator. Do you have to get out of the elevator because you're alone?
No.
So there's a machlokes haposkim. Elevators, I just want to let you know, 99.9999% of time is not going to be a problem. Why is that? Some people say the amount of time that they have to be together is how long? 35 seconds. Because that's how much it takes, God forbid, for the action to occur. It's around, to cook a egg, to fry an egg, they say, ligoma beitza. They learn it from Sota because, by the way, how long does a woman have to be alone with that inferior, the strange man, for her husband to be able to take her for the Sota?
35 seconds?
It's around 35 seconds. But the reason why elevators are not a problem, and that's not the subject of tonight's shiur, is because elevators always, it's opening, it's closing, and you're not in there more than 35 seconds. Any second, somebody could come in and out. And anyways, Rav Moshe Feinstein says an idea that usually you have to be acquainted with the person. So some poskim say usually Yichud, let's say that you're in a taxi in the middle of the night, or in a bus. This is one of the examples of Yichud. You're in Israel, and the male is a bus driver. It's his last stop, but they're not going to be together more than 10-15 minutes. You understand? So some poskim, that's something to consider, especially if it's only a rabbinic yichud, right? With a non-married woman, or with a shiksa, with a non-Jewish person. If the whole private place that they're going to be together is not going to last more than 10-15 minutes, there are poskim that say that it would not be a problem. Anytime that you're going to be together more than 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes, that's the time span where we're worried that the problem of yichud could take place. Now, how about brothers and sisters? Are they allowed to be together? This is a very important halacha, because actually in this last few years somebody asked me about this. Brother and sister, obviously there is no problem of yichud, but it is not recommended for a brother and sister to hire even a hotel. Let's say they go on vacation together more than 30 days. It's brought down in the poskim that it should only be a temporary, they should be roommates. But more than 30 days, it's not recommended. So now let's go back to the problem of the workplace. Now, I have to tell you something very, very important, gentlemen. I had a friend, he was, when I used to live in Baltimore, Maryland, he said he was he was a very, very, very prestigious lawyer, but he wasn't married. So one day, he came into the office with a ring on. So his rabbi told him, Mazal Tov! Why you don't tell me even you were dating? How did you get... He said, Rabbi, I'm not engaged, I'm not even going out. So he says, why do you have a ring on He said, listen, so many of the female lawyers in this law firm were hitting on me for me to go out with them. And he was a very observant, God-fearing Jew, that he told them as a lie that he's a married man, so they would back off. Many years ago, I found a book that I became fascinated by. It's called 9 to 5, a guide to modest conduct for today's workplace. And this was really eye-opening. See, I don't want to sound like an extremist, but when I was living in Jerusalem, it is highly, 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 highly recommended. And I saw a letter that for hundreds of years, everybody in Jerusalem would conduct their life and their business this way. It is highly, highly recommended that especially a woman should work and seek employment in a place where she's a teacher or more of her colleagues are women. And the same thing for a man. If he wants to hire a personal secretary, especially if their office is set up in a way where nobody comes in and out and they work late hours, it's common sense and logic. It is highly recommended that he be in a workplace, in a setting that what? His secretary should, or assistant should be male. Now, if it's a woman, maybe next week or at another time and place we'll do the laws of how you could get out of there not being a problem of Yichud, like opening the door, leaving the door wide open, or telling somebody that you guys are together, so any second you're afraid somebody's going to barge in. But three important points over here about the laws of Yichud. The sota, how does a woman become a sota? You know why? Alcohol, drinking. And you don't need to look far. See, especially when a male and woman, a male and female, they have drinks together. That's why the Parsha of Nazir comes to. So this is one very important thing to be very, very. It is not recommended for you to go out and have a drink with a shiksa, even to a kosher bar, even to a kosher restaurant, because even in the office, because the Torah says that right after the Parsha of Sotah, what comes? Nazir. Because the Nazir says, what got this Sotah to blow up in such a despicable and disgusting way? And she brought shame to her family and her children and everybody. You know what? It was alcohol, wine. So the Nazir makes a neder that for 30 days, what? So he's gonna abstain from wine, and he's gonna act like basically a kohen. Now, my Rosh Yeshiva, blessed memory, was very, very serious about the laws of modesty. And he was a very, very hardcore on it. The Rosh Yeshiva said something very, very important, which I highly recommend. If you do end up hiring a female secretary, always talk to her on a last name basis, not on a first name basis. If her name is Cindy or Samantha or whatever, or Esther or Chava or Leah. Why? Because the most important book of ethics is what? Ariel? The most classical. What?
Pirkei Avot.
Good. Who knows what one of the first Mishnahs in, Pirkei Avot, ethics of our fathers, has so many valuable and priceless lessons. But one of the first lessons is Al tarbe sicha im ha'isha. Do not talk a lot with a woman. The woman. Why? The Gemara, the Mishnah tells you why. Because whoever talks a lot with women will end up in Jahannam, will end up in not a good place. He's going to cause him to nullify and go away from the Torah. So gentlemen, laws of business workplace, the first law is that if you have female co-workers, you should not schmooze with them. Of course we have to be decent human beings and say hi, bye. You can wish them a happy new year. But once you becoming intimate and talking about you share your personal life with them. That's how this sotah, that's the beginning of the end. The Rosh Yeshiva, he said it, he had a tape, which I heard, which was so eloquent. See, that relationship that a man and woman, they share their deepest personal stuff, Ariel, and they share their, what's going on in their life and how they're feeling and, all this, that deserves to be in the framework, what? Of a husband and wife. That's why that's why you get a spouse, to share your hobbies with and your personal and your aspirations. But that should be off limits, because once you're becoming buddy and you start sharing your personal things, it's going to lead, God forbid, to problems of sotah. And on a final note, probably today, the most common place where it's forbidden to do Yichud is, where? With your computer. It is forbidden to have a personal computer, an iPad. We just started Daf Yomi Nedarim. Kol koname vekonache. Any personal device. You know why? Because guys, it used to be maybe a dozen years ago, you could only be together with the person of the opposite sex, especially this is for men. But now, it's the World Wide Web. You can visit the worst pornographic websites. That's why, whoever's listening to this, you should get your mother, father, your rabbi, a trusted friend, even if you're married, to put a filter. And this is especially very dangerous for people that have teenage girls or boys. You have to put, like K9 is a very good, because, guys, what